Hello everyone, I hope you're all having a great day today, and in this video I'm going to be ranking all of Thor's MCU appearances in MCU movies. Up to this point he's appeared in 8 movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, technically 9 if you count the post-credits scene in Doctor Strange, or I guess 10 because there was footage of him in Deadpool and Wolverine, but to be completely honest those really don't count. But before I hop into the ranking, keep in mind this is just my opinion. I would love to hear how you'd rank his appearances in the comments section down below. And without any further ado, let's hop right into it. Coming in at number 8 is his appearance in Thor: Love and Thunder. And my logic is pretty simple here. This is not a great movie really overall, and he's not the only character in it that was done dirty. Chris Hemsworth gave the best performance he could have, but there's only so much you can do when you're not given the best lines. But the thing that really frustrates me about this appearance of Thor is that this easily could have been the best because this is post-Endgame after all of his PTSD. And that's what they kind of address at the start of the film, how Thor has to deal with losing all of his loved ones, and then of course the love of his life, Jane, comes back, but then she's dying from cancer, and they could have just been so emotional and good. But they just did a terrible job of balancing the humor and emotion in this movie. So Thor's character arc in here just comes off as underwhelming. This could have been like Guardians of the Galaxy 3, where that was a funny but emotional send-off to the characters, but they just failed Thor completely in this movie, and a lot of the times he just comes off as annoying like the other characters. And again, none of this was Chris Hemsworth's fault. He did the best job he could have, but just what they did with Thor in this movie was just kind of cringe. Coming in at number 7 is Thor's appearance in Avengers: Age of Ultron. And when it comes to Thor in this movie, he's not really like front and center when it comes to the plot. Some of the other characters just have some more interesting stuff going on. But whenever it pauses to focus on Thor, it's to kind of set up Ragnarok, where he's having these visions and that kind of stuff with the Infinity Stones. And then he has to go out of his way to take a bath, which just feels completely out of place in the movie it's in. So there's some interesting stuff that was going on, but it just felt very rushed because it was trying to set up Thor Ragnarok in a movie where there was already a lot of other stuff going on. So Thor just really wasn't done that much justice in this movie. Coming in at number 6 is Thor's appearance in The Avengers. Now this is actually a really great movie, but to be completely honest, when it comes to Thor, he's kind of just there because he's required to. I mean, obviously Loki is the villain of the movie, so Thor has information people need and that kind of stuff. And of course he obviously has to join the Avengers in the fight. But just in general throughout this movie, Thor's not the one that does anything like too memorable, and he just isn't really given any crazy character development or anything like that, which to be completely honest, that's not really a criticism of the movie, because when they tried to give him a character development in Age of Ultron when there was already other stuff going on, that didn't work that great. So it's just a case where it's nice that he's in the movie, of course, and he's making connections with these other characters, but he's just not the one particularly in this movie who's like having all this crazy character development. Coming in at number 5 is Thor's appearance in the first Thor movie from 2011. And this one's a little tough to evaluate because Thor kind of goes on a roller coaster journey in here, and there's a lot of stuff to appreciate. Obviously with Chris Hemsworth's performance in here, it was just really good. And this is where Thor kind of falls in love with Jane. And there's just some interesting stuff they do with the story, with them kind of like introducing Thor and how he gets his hammer taken away. So he actually doesn't have his powers for most of the movie, and he has to learn to not be selfish and that kind of stuff. So he does have a pretty big character arc in this movie, but it is kind of almost like a generic character arc that like you see with characters a lot. Still, nonetheless, this was a pretty good introduction to the character, and this might be one of his funnier appearances because he's in a fish out of water scenario where he's on Earth and he's just not used to it. But I will say, I don't know why his eyebrows were so blonde in this movie. Coming in at number 4 is Thor's appearance in The Dark World, and this is where I really thought he actually had some underrated character development, just given the nature of the fact that this movie itself is underrated. What I particularly like about Thor in this movie is that he's really like building a connection with Loki. They're getting closer to each other, but Thor also has some trials in this movie with obviously his mother dying, so that's a huge emotional beat. And Thor really just has some insecurities and that kind of stuff, and he doesn't really know if he should still be with Jane and putting her in danger. And it's also just nice seeing Thor fight people in this movie. We get to see him in a lot of cool action with his hammer, and I feel like stuff like that gets sidelined in a lot of the other movies he's in. Coming in at number 3 is Thor's appearance in Endgame, and yes, I don't think they ruined him in this movie whatsoever. A lot of people are not a big fan of how Thor gained a lot of weight in this movie, and they just thought it felt like underwhelming and they turned him into a joke. And I will say there's definitely like some parts where it feels like they did kind of turned him a little bit more into a joke and didn't continue his character arc from Infinity War in the best possible way. But in all honesty, there is some really good stuff within this movie that Thor does. Obviously, at the very beginning in this movie, it's right in line with Infinity War, where Thor is dealing with the immediate regret of his failure, and that's where he completely loses it and kills Thanos. But then obviously you have Thor being a broken hero, and yes, they did make him gain a lot of weight, so it did turn a little bit humorous. But to be completely honest, it is kind of funny seeing Thor play Fortnite, and nonetheless, there's still some emotional stuff in here, like when he travels back to Asgard during the Dark World timeline, and he gets to have a nice moment with his mother. But once you get to the final battle of the movie, that's where I really think there's some satisfying stuff going on with Thor fighting Thanos with the other Avengers in this movie. And honestly, Thor is pretty much like just as powerful as he was in Infinity War in that scene. Coming in at number 2 is Thor's appearance in Ragnarok. And this was the only Thor movie that was actually something like notably very good. And I just think it was nice seeing Thor continue to connect with Loki in this movie. And of course, you also have Thor losing his father at the beginning of the movie and having to deal with that. And the movie also kind of dives into the fact that he lost his hammer and he has to learn that he is more than just his hammer, and it's kind of about him turning into more of a leader and taking on the responsibility of defending his people. And that's just really nice, because while this movie does lean more into humor, there's also just some really epic moments like at the end of the movie where Thor's finally able to control his power without using his hammer. And it's just stuff like that that just feels awesome. But coming in at number 1 is his appearance in Avengers Infinity War. And this builds off of what Ragnarok set up. But at the very beginning of this movie, you have Thor's brother getting killed right in front of him. And he just has so much trauma, like once you get to the part where he meets the Guardians of the Galaxy. And there's just so much epicness with him building his new hammer and surviving the power of that one star or whatnot. And in this movie, he's just driven by the desire to fight Thanos once again. And once you get to the end of the movie, he's super powerful and he finally gets that chance and completely blows it. But it's just kind of awesome because we see a more emotional side of the character, while at the same time he also is very confident just because he's kind of driven by rage, wanting to defeat Thanos. But overall, that was my ranking of Thor's appearances in the MCU. Again, share your ranking in the comment section down below. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.